What's going on, everyone? In today's video, I'm going to go ahead and show you a handful of some awesome tips and tricks and some exclusive features available for the Pro version of the latest generation iPhone 13. So I'm going to go ahead and show you some awesome ways you can really utilize the ultra wide lens, which is exclusive for the Pro lineup iPhone 13. And a lot of people don't know this, but the Pro is actually much heavier than previously, than ever before. And because of that, there's some really interesting stuff inside it. So let's just go ahead and get started. Let's start off with some exclusive things that can be found on the camera app. So, the ultra wide lens, as I was telling you about, this thing is absolutely amazing. It not only gives everything a much more pleasant viewing angle because it has like a fisheye effect, captures a lot more. It honestly feels like a GoPro, like an action cam. It feels like you're recording with an action cam, which that is one of the hidden features. If you actually record a video shot like this with your ultra wide lens and you start running, it actually comes out looking extremely stable, very similar to what the technology that GoPro uses on their action camera. You'll experience a very similar quality in video if you have to record something while running, so switch to your ultra wide for the smoothest transaction. Now, other additional goodies you have with the camera is the ability to smoothly switch from the telephoto lens to the wide angle lens. If you tap and hold on the numbers, you can actually like tweak it to your liking. This is good to know, especially when you want to do like a dolly effect. Whenever you have a subject in focus and whatever direction you're heading or walking away from, move the zoom towards the opposite direction and it will create this awesome dolly zoom illusion. This is what videographers have been using for years. It's called the dolly effect. It just makes everything look unique and cinematic, I guess. And then an additional thing you could do with the ultra wide lens, the iPhone 13 Pro actually received focus on the ultra wide lens. So you could take some awesome macro shots by going up close and personal. You could take some awesome looking photos like this uniquely too. And then yes, you could also do this with the video as well. If you're shooting video, the focus is also still available. And then other useful tools to know about this is on top here, it's not just your timer, access to your flash or take off flash entirely if you don't need it. But over here you can switch between 1080p or 4K by simply tapping on the right corner. 4K is 4K, HD is 1080p. And in here you can also switch between the different FPS option sets available on your phones as well. So 24 if you want for 4K. Switching to photos. The iPhone has a lot of cool options. Some of these are the same ones we saw from past iOS updates, but the new one for the 13th is the Apple's calling this photographic styles. This is how you have quick access to this. It has a couple of them pre-made, ready for you. So you have your standards, you have rich contrast, you have this one, you have warm, cool. They're like filters that you can actually preset. So when you take that shot, they're using that filter already. But not only that, a pro tip is that you can actually go in and adjust it to your personal preference by simply tapping either tone or warmth. This will also allow you to adjust it to your personal liking, and will actually like change the title depending on how much warm you add. So like rich contrast and such. So you can actually go in there and customize it to your personal preference. And then of course here you have the ability to take off and on live photos. Whenever I prefer personally to take photos with live. This way, whenever you take a photo and you go back, if the person blinks, you can always just tap edit and go into the live circle icon right here and key it to the point where your eyes were open or you're actually doing like a cool pose, and just mark it as key photo, and now that is going to be the primary photo for that photo that you took. So someone blinked, just move it back and you're good. It should be no longer blinking. Not like dying, but you know what I mean. Now back at the camera, if you tap the up arrow right here, you have additional options. Here you can actually adjust the night mode function. If you want to increase the timer, just you could always tap the up arrow and this will allow you to adjust the timer. I like to personally leave it on auto, but there has been time I needed to expose it a little bit longer. Contrast, here you can change the contrast ratio if you want it to be Instagram ready or not. You could do that here. I like to leave it by default. I'll just crop it later. And of course here you have your exposure. You can also adjust this on the fly. Timer, if you need to take like a selfie, put a timer in 10 or 3 seconds even, or just have it off entirely. And then some pre-filters you can actually have equipped while you're taking a photo. And then raw. If you do a lot of videography, use Lightroom and stuff like that, I highly recommend shooting RAW. Just the only con with RAW is that it gathers more data, so each photo takes up more storage on your smartphone. So if you take a lot of photos, not recommended to shoot RAW unless you want to go into your computer and edit the color and everything a lot more. Now, a very cool noticeable improvement for the iPhone 13 is the speaker hardware. These speakers are super loud, louder than ever before, which is perfect because if you're curious what type of case I have a life-proof nude case on my iPhone 13 Pro. And a con with these life-proof cases is that usually the material that's used to like prevent water from going in blocks the speaker grills right here. As you see, the speaker does have a cover, but thanks to the new louder speakers, the new hardware that Apple's using on these newer generation iPhone 13, this makes up for it. So these speakers are really loud. Now, since we're in the talk of hardware, another new hardware change this year for the iPhone 13 Pro is the display. This display is a ProMotion display, which means it can go up to 120 Hertz. But it's not just a regular ProMotion display. No, this display will actually adjust from the speed rate that you are moving on your phone. So, for example, if you're just slowly scrolling through like a list of something on Safari, as an example, it's just going to go to 60 Hertz. But if you go into an excessive rate, like you just scroll through it something really quickly, that's when the 120 Hertz will kick in. Apple is naming this technology a variable display. But if you want to cap it, you always keep it at 60. There is a way you can override this by simply going into your settings, go into accessibilities, go into the motion section, and right here where it says limit frame rate, enable this, and now it's going to be locked at 60. I'm not sure why you want to do this, but there is that option. It should possibly save some battery life, but another thing to also note is whenever you have your device set to low power mode, it will also cap the display at 60 this way as well. Now, another cool thing about these iPhone 13 Pros and that the iPhone 13 Max also applies is the brightness can go up to 1200 nits, which is insanely bright and it's perfect if you're a drone operator, because the thing I hated with my iPhone 12 Pro is that I always had to go underneath shade when operating a drone in direct sunlight because the display is just too bright outside. No longer is the case with the iPhone 13 Pro, as this thing can go up to a really high nit rating, unlike previously where it was just capped at 1000. Now, there's additional settings you can adjust for the camera. If you hop into your settings, I'm going to go ahead and do a quick walk around. In settings, go into camera, you'll see format, and all you need to know about this is high efficiency is the most compatible along other Apple products. So if your main computers are all Macs, leave it on high efficiency, especially if that's where you're going to primarily back up all your photos on. If you have Windows computers but you're using an iPhone, do most compatible. And in case you experience any issues, you could go back and change that format right here. Apple Pro RAW, basically with this enabled, I personally like leaving this on. It does gather a little bit more detail, so it does use a little bit more storage whenever you take photos and stuff like that, but this gives you the ability to adjust the color and more details on your photos in case you're editing them on your smartphone. So that's why I like leaving it on. Just gives me more freedom to adjust. Video recording is just the resolutions you can adjust. Video HDR, you can always enable this, record up to 60 FPS and 10-bit high dynamic range, including Dolby Vision. So for the max resolution or best quality possible, leave that enabled. Lock cameras, do not switch between cameras while you're recording. This is all personal preference. And then you got the slow motion. So here's where you guys should go in to enable the maximum FPS rate. So 1080p at 240 FPS is the max for recording slow motion shots. Record stereo sound, recommend leaving that on. And in the preserve settings in here, basically anything you adjust in these different modes, like night mode for example, like you change the timer, when this is enabled, it's going to remember that. So next time when you actually use it, it doesn't default back to 0. It actually will save where you last left it off on. That's what all of these little different modes do. So the same goes for the exposure, Apple Pro, portrait zoom, and all that good stuff. Volume up for burst. Whenever with this enabled, then you go into the camera app and you tap on the volume up button while you're in photo mode. This will just do a constant photo burst. That's what that does. Going back, scan QR code, have this enabled. This way you don't have to have this in your control center. The camera app will be able to read the QR codes. Live text. This is new for iOS 15. Whenever you take a photo of text, like a sign or a billboard or something, you can actually copy and paste that text. Leave this enabled if you want that feature. The grid, personal preference. This will just give you the grid of 4, which will allow you to center your subject and such, so all your photos come out looking professionally. Going back, mirror front camera. Enable this to prevent that weird mirror effect whenever you have your front facing camera facing you. This way when you take a shot, it actually looks like how you took it instead of like looking at it like it's reversed. So that's what that does. View outside frame. Have this enabled whenever you crop into something, like when you take a photo and you go into edit, you can actually use the crop to use it to readjust in case the subject is out of frame. So that's what that does. It gives you the ability to go back and actually like center the subject in case you mess up. And then the photography style, this is that photography style I was telling you about, but here we'll actually show you a photo example, I mean, of the subject with still settings. So you can also adjust it here as well. And then these last two, I would personally just recommend having them enabled. The description's right there on what they do. Now, an important feature to highlight that Apple didn't really talk so much into detail more about is, yes, it's true, both the iPhone 13 and the iPhone 13 Max actually share the exact same features. The only noticeable difference between the two is just obviously the larger display on the Max and the larger battery on the Max. And the feature I'm talking about is Apple's new 4K ProRes, which is coming available later on this year. This feature is only going to be available for iPhones with a larger storage capacity of 256 gigabytes. So if you go with the default 128 gigabyte storage, you're not going to have this feature, unfortunately. Not sure why Apple decided to do this, but now you know. Now, when charging your phone for the maximum battery life longevity, highly recommend going to your settings real quick, go into battery, and go ahead and go into battery health. I forgot to charge it this morning, don't worry. And make sure you have optimized battery charging enabled. Now this will actually allow the iPhone to charge its battery at a nice control rate that shouldn't cause any harm to the battery. Now, even though this is just a 6.1 inch display, this can be a very large display to some, which can make things challenging to reach on top of the screen without you having to take your hand off the screen and go on top like so. If you want to add a shortcut that give you easy access to the top part of the display, in your settings, go into accessibility. In the touch tab right here, enable reachability. Now whenever you swipe down from the bottom like this, it'll bring down the screen, giving you quick access to the top part of your notifications or control center. Now if you have an Apple Watch, you'll be glad to know that Apple finally fixed this bug that was recently happened on all iPhone 13 models, where the Apple Watch was unable to unlock your iPhone. This feature is good to enable if you have like a face mask on and you want Face ID to still be able to unlock without you having to enter the PIN code. If you quickly go into your settings, go into passcode, and you have an Apple Watch paired to your iPhone, you could enable it right here. And now whenever you're wearing a face mask or something that's blocking your face, if Face ID recognizes your outline and you have your Apple Watch nearby, it will unlock with Face ID. So you no longer have to enter the PIN code even while you're wearing your face mask. All in all, now you know basically everything there is to know about your latest iPhone 13 Pro and 13 Pro Max. Do you really allow you to get the most out of your device, including that ultra wide lens with that new software feature updates. If you'd like to know other tips and tricks, some additional features that's integrated on the new iOS 15, you can go ahead and watch that video over there. So I go through all the changes that I personally did on this device, like the Safari search bar, notice that's back on top here. If you want to find out how you adjust all of that, check out that video. And the video next to that one, that's just a video YouTube's recommending specifically for you. Thanks so much for watching, take care, and I'll catch you all in the next one. See ya.